here for the stream. All right, welcome. Welcome, Anke Domscheit-Berg, to stage 1. Anke is a member of the German Parliament for the Linkspartei, for the Left Party. She's part of the Committee for Digitalization, and she is sort of the long-fetched arm from civil society. So she continuously makes small inquiries, big inquiries, and really brings herself forward in that regard, and us as well. So thank you very much. Her focus is common well-being, common good. And Anke is here today about climate-friendly digitalization, coalition agreement versus reality. I'm excited. Warm hand of applause one more time. See you in a bit. Thank you. Thank you for dimming the light. You can't really see how many people are sitting here. All right. There's been a few words that were being said about me. I would like to add a few more words. I've been a member of parliament since 2017, focusing on digital politics. People have given me the label of being a net activist, but I'm also a publicist. I was 15 years in the IT sector. I also have a voluntary position in my hometown, where I support a makerspace with a repair cafe. In private, my husband and I, we actually have a small data center in our basement, and we actually are using the lost heat from the data center as radiation for the house. So what are our goals as an oppositional politician? Obviously, the entire parliament is, like, our job is to keep the government in check. I try to do small inquiries to generate transparency, but also like set certain topics in the public sphere and represent the civil society. And that's one of my, like, it's very important and close to my heart. And I have a few tools that you can use for that. So obviously, from Phoenix, the channel, you know, you can do talks, you can make proposals, you can do all sorts of PR work, public relations work. You can also try to do hearings. So now I'm not part of any fraction anymore. But in January, we'll form a new group. And then I will be able to set new topics and create hearings. And I would like to have a hearing on open source, and I would really like to bring that forward. And maybe in the next few months, keep an eye out for it. And I obviously like to invite a few experts with regards to certain subjects so that they can add their knowledge. And yeah. And obviously I also do like written questions. That's something that I can do on my own 4 times a month. There's a few restrictions. So I can't generate more than 28 responses. So I couldn't ask if all data centers are using lost heat radiators, because there's more than 28 of them. But if you want answers to that, you would have to do that as part of the fraction. So basically, this is due to the regulations that we have in our parliament in how members of the parliament can basically bring forward questions and all that sort of stuff. So we have, for example, this one, a small inquiry based on the sustainabilities of data center of the German state. So none of the responses that we got were processable by machines. Basically, what you get back is a lot of tables that are contradictory at best, but you obviously try to get the best that you can from the data that you're being given. So what did our current coalition in governing party agree upon. So one of them was that we would generate or create data centers, or would really make our data centers that we have sustainable, and we focus on climate protection, and that by 2027 they would be climate neutral. And also something that we try to do, that until 2025 they would all introduce what we call EMAS, it's the Eco Management and Audit Scheme. And another thing that they agreed upon was that they were going to have anything that was being purchased as new IT equipment would need to be certified based on the Blue Angel standard. Obviously, there was a digital strategy that usually includes the sentence, what we will want to be measured against in 2025. One central aspect in this was that lost heating from data centers would be utilized better. It's not quite precise, but another thing that was added was climate-friendly cooling agents, energy efficiency register for data centers, and obviously also methods that would make sure that energy efficient software development would be happening. So the question kind of is that I would like to dive into is, how are they measuring up to this? So what is the state currently doing? So they have three kind of layers, aspects that they can drive this forward to. So the state takes money to work as a sponsor in this regard, right? So, but they also function as a regulatory institution. So the sanctioning power of the government is being executed here. And then there's obviously a third aspect, which is something that I would like to focus a little bit more closely on as a buyer and as a user. So simply as an institution that has a really, really strong market power. All right, so as a sponsor, I brought one example. So based on my small inquiry, the state spends 1.4 billion sponsoring money into the sector of artificial intelligence. That's 514 things that they funded, and then 79% of them failed with regards to sustainability. So all right, so she's basically now describing the split of whether or not these things that were being sponsored had any actual requirements for sustainability. And we all know the levels of sustainability that kind of correlates to artificial intelligence and the amount of computing power that it needs. So 405 of them did not take sustainability into consideration at all. So there's the other subject, to repair instead of throwing out, was an important subject matter for the current coalition ruling party, and it was something that I got very excited about. They claimed they would contribute a proper budget for this. And I fought for this money being put forward to that. They were claiming to be adding 2 million. My colleagues from the coalition also thought that wasn't enough, but it's better. Small sums are better than none. In reality, exactly €0 have been actually gotten to where they were going to be putting their money to. And I doubt that this will happen the next 3 days. So this chance was a missed opportunity. So this money will just go to nothing. All right. As a regulatory instance, there's obviously something like the energy efficiency law that was passed in 2023, only a couple months old. But unfortunately, it was polished basically until it reached ineffectiveness. So the data centers that we have in Germany, roughly 55,000. So 1% of these actually fall under this new legislation. So most of the data centers are too small to be applicable to this new introduction and change. So that means that there's only 16 data centers that now fall under this new regulation. And all the other ones now are not needing to implement any mandatory changes. So the state itself basically lowered the bar for themselves to the lowest that they possibly can. A new thing that they also added was that they wanted to have new data centers that should be using 20% at least of the lost heat generated by the data centers. Just to remind you of what was said in the coalition agreement was that in 2027, these data centers should be climate neutral, and this basically contradicts what they're then now trying and passing with this law. As a third, there's obviously them as a buyer and as a user, so hardware, software, purchasing software, or using your own developments, but also all sorts of IT and communication services, and that's actually a lot. And so the energy utilization of the state was 345 gigawatt per hours. It's roughly as many as 138,000 two-person household generate. So a couple of years back, this would lower itself consistently. But since 2020, we've had a slight increase in this every year. And after doing a few more inquiries, we're expecting this number to continuously raise. And obviously, it's about a large sum of money. And the state can really control and make decisions and influence where stuff is leaning and going. These 13 billion euros are only the ongoing IT contracts of the 10 largest contract partners. So this is something that I also got from my small inquiry. They refused to tell me who these contracts were with, but the number of 625 million Microsoft licenses, I can sort of do the math and add two and two together to figure out who our contract partner is here. So there's two companies that are sort of the big players that are kind of sticking out. They're big licensing contracts. I've already mentioned Microsoft, but those are all. Something that I really surprised was the top runner, which is Oracle. They have a contract, a framework contract. There's one contract that has 4.6 billion euros that will last until the end of the next, so the following government, not the one that's currently in government, but the one that follows after that. So this framework contract will last until 2030. And of course, the state has data centers, 194 data centers, maybe eventually, we don't really know. It's really difficult to figure this out. So SF means written inquiry, KA is small question, and you can see that their responses kind of go up and down and up and down, and it's kind of difficult to really know, like these two orange ones, were from the same year, same question, but we got different responses with different numbers depending on which ministry that you ask. It was quite interesting. There was +20, -20. It was a bit mysterious to get these deviating numbers. So we see 2023, we have 118. Why did I say 194? Well, basically what I did was I did a little bit of thinking, and I was like, well, well, the BME had 67 data centers, and we were like, where did they kind of disappear to? Like, did they just get shut down? Probably not. They were just kind of not mentioned, and that's why I'm just going to add them. It's the same for the Ministry for Culture and Media, and I kind of just simply did the ones from the year prior and the one from the Chancellor's office. I assume that they still have theirs. So let's say that the 194 number of data centers is a much more plausible number of data centers. This is a problem.
Because the objective existed that the government IT should be unified and the number of data centers be reduced to 10. That is a large project, which it takes a long time. Officially, it's planned to take from 2015 to 2025. It's an expensive project. 3.5 billion euro are budgeted. The plan was initially 1 billion, but, well, you know how it is. It gets more expensive as time goes on. And perhaps at some point it might work, because currently the reduction towards 10 is obviously not working, because the numbers that you've already seen indicate that the numbers are actually rising and not getting lower. Although I have heard, after asking again, that the plan is still in force, but it's just 3 master computing centers that they want to unify, or data centers. So there is a certain dissonance that you can sense here. And of course, I handed in another question, a written question on the 8th of December. That's when it was answered, and it was quite entertaining to read the answer. The Environment Ministry said that next year they would start working out a recommendation for a sustainable downsizing of data centers on the basis of consolidation. That's when they would start working on. Is there any way of formulating an intention in a less vague way? I wonder how the people that write down these things feel as they do it. So they are going to start by working out a recommendation, which probably no one will adhere to. So the situation is bad in general. I've asked for details about these 118 because those were the ones that I was given any information about. But from these 118, a marginal amount actually had an energy management system, a monitoring of power, electricity, climate and water consumption, or an IT last monitoring. Most of them don't have any of this. It looks slightly better where it comes to renewable energy share. 3/4 of computing centers have data on that. The same applies to power consumption. But is that enough to be happy about if still 25% don't even measure the energy consumption, the power consumption of their data center? That's such a low bar. You shouldn't be too proud of that. And of course, for many years, the announcement has been made that a new government, a new reporting scheme on green IT is to be put in place, and then finally we will have the data. But the answers I have been received so far, what do they look like? How sustainable is the government IT at the federal level, actually? So I asked the computer centers about their exhaust heat, about climate-friendly cooling agents. Do they use renewable energies? Has any of them been awarded the Blue Angel certificate, which is awarded in Germany for environmentally good behavior and products in particular? So that's what I asked. And here is the not so enjoyable result. Using exhaust heat, well, that's just a side note, 4%. 4 of 118 do this. That's actually less than last year, which I cannot explain. And what was surprising to me was that the Climate Ministry of Robert Habeck, the Green Minister for Climate and the Economy, said that 0 of 12 data centers were actually using exhaust heat. It used to be 2 out of 11, but regarding exhaust heat, this is not like a light switch that you turn off and on. It's not so easy to understand. But also the Environment Ministry was not so good. Only one of 6 data centers would use that. Regarding environmentally friendly cooling agents, again, it was a dark picture. Only 13 of the 118 computing centers used climate-friendly cooling agents. Some didn't even know what 32 didn't even know what cooling agents they use, and it's only one more than last year that say they use cooling agents that are environmentally friendly, and this does not apply to the Ministry on the Economy and Climate Change because none of the 12 there use that. And sometimes, of course, these people use co-location data centers, and I asked, is this a part of the contract with these co-locations, and the answer sadly is that nowhere, none of these co-locations, that is the case. And regarding environmentally friendly power, green energy, it seems to have improved. Now, the share has risen sharply, it seems, but if you look into the detail, it was 2/3 without any information, and this year it's only a quarter without any information, so the actually unknowns have been clarified, maybe. So I've asked how many percent use renewable energies, and comparing to last year, I could only find 4 data centers that had somehow converted or increased their share of green energy. And we love the data ministry of Volker Wissing. We love them. 8 out of 10 data centers they used didn't actually state anything. Well, now, these are 118 Blue Angel badges, the certificate for environmentally friendly products, and with these green arrows, I've marked the 2 out of 118 that have been given the old version of that certificate. If you look at the new standards for the Blue Angel certificates, which raises the bar, sadly, none of the 118 qualify. Sad. But it's not just about data centers either. That was the part about data centers, but the software issue is important as well. The Agency on the Environment has published new data this year about the software they use. And inefficiently programmed software, they say, can use up to 4 times as much energy as efficiently programmed software for the same task. So we have the light green software, the bad, the large number is what a standard text processing software uses for a standard task. And then we have this other software that uses much less energy for the very same task. So it makes a huge difference what software you use, but also the usage of memory, of RAM, is extremely influenced by the way the software is programmed. Again, 2 examples, the green and CPU power. The green software, the light green software, uses much more CPU and RAM than the other one. And of course, it's clear, if you program a software in a way that it uses hardware a lot, then the probability that I have to exchange the hardware early is much higher. And with most devices that you carry around with you, from laptops to smartphones, the part of the resource footprint is the footprint of the device you carry is made up by 80% by the production of the device. So exchanging it early is bad. So I asked whether the federal government uses energy-efficient software. And the answer was that it didn't develop anything themselves with the Blue Angel software certificate. That was their intention. There is an open source document reader called Killer, which is free software, freely available, that did receive it. And I also asked about the website, which is also self-programmed, and asked whether there were any guidelines, binding guidelines. And the answer says there are no binding guidelines, yada, yada, yada. General administration guidelines exist. But the answer went on. All this exists. There are guidelines, standards, service standards, papers of all kind, another page. So all that was in the answer. So that's what all this has to be adhered to by the software that they want to have. So I checked this with the Climate Ministry, and there is a website Carbon, and the website I looked at was dirtier than 97% of all web pages globally. So I would say either the guidelines are bad, that they claim that were used, or no one stuck to them. I don't know. So I'll summarize the state of affairs. Not much has improved. A lot has been announced in terms of intentions, and I should say one thing that was good. I asked about hardware usage concepts after it's retired, and for the first time I heard that yes, there is a framework contract that has been got into, and that is actually now getting organized, and the rest is just announcements of intentions. Now, reporting is supposed to be improved. From next year, truly it is going to be improved, they say. And then the planning of measurements is supposed to be started for the use of the Blue Angel certificate in the main data center. So measurement planning is to be started in 2024, and the energy efficiency register for data centers is supposed to start in 2024. And that is in a pilot operating mode for a while now. And it asks the data centers to donate data for the energy efficiency register. And of course, I asked also how many federal data centers have actually donated data, and the answer was, you can guess? Can you? It was 0, of course. And in 2024, the right to repair law is supposed to come forth, and there truly is going to be a subsidy program or a support program for repair cafes. And I can promise you, I will keep asking. It's supposed to be €3 million now. I'll see how it works. Was it million or billion for the repair cafes? Million. Okay. So, the sustainability of the data is so bad. It's way, way bad, slightly improved, but still very bad indeed. Sustainability of the IT, truly deficient, and it's huge promises, but implementation is either missing or very weak. I really was hopeful when the coalition treaty was entered into. That I saw so many good things there, but it's just paper, nothing's happened. Of course, the government period, the legislature hasn't finished, but personally my optimism isn't that great. And I can also state that where there are rules, which probably are not so bad, but where there are rules they're not adhered to, there is no verification, and probably not enough education either about all these guidelines. The people that are supposed to implement them probably don't know them, so there's a lot to be done. And you can say in one sentence, the Progress Coalition, as they call themselves, is not a driver for sustainable digitalization, neither as a buyer nor as a sponsor or a regulator. And that's important to say, that kind of advertising should be allowed. To be in opposition is bad, yes, but especially from the left side, it is important to be there because transparency can lead to pressure. You have the media reporting on it, and these kinds of inquiries is not going to be asked by conservative parties or Nazi opposition parties or the governing parties, the supposedly progressive parties, including the Green Party supporting the government. They do not ask these kinds of questions. It doesn't really link to the coalition, but the people that think in a similar way that I do, they don't use inquiries. They kind of do it through the back door, and that kind of information doesn't get into public knowledge, and that's why it's important to be in opposition at this point and in this kind of position. And if you would like to have more information, my website has all the details, anke-domscheit-berg.de. I've linked my small inquiry about the sustainability of the federal government IT, but there are many more. You all can find all of them in the tab Parliamentary Initiatives, all in German, I suppose, says the interpreter. We have some time for questions, but there are various ways of contacting me. Pick your preferred means of contacting me. Of course, I am on Mastodon as well. And now it's over to you. Microphones are here And here in the room. Okay, we have people walking up to the microphones. So let's start over here, please. Yes, thank you for this talk, Anke. It was a great talk for your engagement. You are one of the people, I'm working in this industry, so I'm one of those that you have complained about, rightly, I should say. And the competency that you have, you are one of the shining counterexamples. So now the concrete question. All these statistics you related to the data centers, that can be done, but the energy efficiency law only applies to 1% of these, as you said. So that would be about 500 maybe overall. So it should be fair to say that about 50 to 60% of the capacity, computing capacity, should be affected. So all the emissions that we're talking about, they are in terms of capacity, not just depending on the number of data centers. Do you have any numbers on capacity? And could you run some processing on that? Well, regarding capacity, are you talking about CPU usage? You talk about IT capacity in terms of data centers, how much IT power they have. They have 5, 10, 20 megawatts of IT capacity, or maybe a few kilowatts on the more smaller ones. So that's quite a difference. Well, I do know that below 300 kilowatts power, you have 16. Many of them are way smaller than that. I did actually break this down in one of the inquiries I made. So I don't have this in my mind at the moment. But 50%, honestly, even if it is 50% of the the IT capacity, the processing capacity, that still is not enough. The climate crisis is bigger, and 50% will not get us there.
I could not agree more. Thank you very much. Microphone number 1. And I've heard we also have questions from the internet. Thank you. 300 kilowatts data center are really small. The Americans have 600 megawatts at this point of time. In Berlin, we'll have one that's being added with 100 megawatts. Another question, though. But do you feel the lobby pressure that's being applied from the industry that's being given to the coalition or applied to the coalition? I don't want to make excuses, but can you elaborate like how the lobby is influencing them? And I would also have to say clearly and state clearly that all these software developers and producers earn a third of their complete and total annual gross from the public hand. And if we were really fair about this, then the government should really take their responsibility seriously to be part of the supervising body, given the amount of annual gross that they make up for companies like that. So as for the energy efficiency law, it was quite clear, it became really clear how strongly the lobbies really influenced and applied pressure by basically saying that they would not build any new data center if a given number was being passed in the law. Whenever that happened, I would stand there and be like, well, that's a bit strange. Like in my electoral group, there's a big, giant data center that's being created and built because the city wants to utilize the lost heat generated by the data center. So like this line of argument doesn't really apply, and it's not accurate. And thank you very much for the competency compliment that I was given earlier. But I think oftentimes people that are sitting in these groups that are making decisions, they don't really have these levels of expertise that are maybe necessary to go into these conversations. So they know really well and lots about the paragraphs and how to write the proper legalese around things and how to write up the laws, but they oftentimes are lacking the buyer's competency and to know when you're being basically pulled across the table by the opposing party that's trying to tell you things and simply it's just pushing their own agenda forward into that law. So and then basically you have this this licensing system where you have a contract going and then you just renew it because you don't need to deal with a new contract. But honestly, like when I read the coalition agreement, like I read all of this about like open source, and I got really, really excited. And then I kept asking like how many of the software things that have been passed are open source, and I kept getting tables that can't publish because security. But what I am allowed to tell you is that the digital ministry that is responsible for this digital strategy that spent 22 million on software development, and 0.2% of that were spent on open source software. So I inquired with Volker Wissing, like, would you maybe enlarge that percentage number to like get it up to 1? And yes, and they want to enlarge the number of open source development projects, but it's not really happening.
Okay, a question from the internet via the Signal Angels. Yes, thank you. From the internet, of course, we had a lot of debates also regarding the number of data centers. Do you know how the ministry or the federal government as a whole defines a data center to then arrive at a number? Actually, that is the first time that I'm being addressed in a formal Sie form in German. German has these Sie and Du forms of address. I don't know the definition by heart, but it was sensible. I remember that much. In my first inquiry, I first asked how does the German government define a data center, and after that definition that was given, I asked, how many of these data centers do you have? And since then, with each new inquiry, I refer back to that definition that was once given to me. So you can look that up on my website. You can find this. I don't know it by heart, but it did seem reasonable. It was a plausible definition of a data center. Okay, now we'll do it in a zip kind of way. We'll now move to the hall again. Yes, you did say that there are various operators of data centers. Is there actually one ministry that's actually leading the IT strategy of the government as a whole? Or is the problem that there are so many players trying to do their own thing? Or is the digital ministry perhaps the leading one? No, it is not. But regarding IT consolidation of the German government, that is actually a two-threaded approach. So the use is supposed to be unified to the two pieces of software per type, maybe one open source and one by Microsoft for text processing. So that's the consolidation. And then there is the tech consolidation. That includes the data centers. And that's where the Ministry for the Finance is responsible, Christian Lindner's ministry. And for use, it is the Interior Ministry that is responsible. So they have certain ways of steering the process. But because in the first 4 years of the consolidation, it worked so badly, even in the times of the Social Democratic Conservative coalition, they actually placed a systemic steering committee in the Chancellor's office because they realized that equals amongst each other are hard to control. So they put it up to the level of the Chancellor's office, and the first few weeks of Olaf Scholz being in office at the Chancellor, he kind of threw this all out like a hot potato and handed back these responsibilities, even including the steering of the consolidation, sadly.
Signal Angels from the internet. Yes, it's about the data centers. If most of them should be permanently shut down and should be consolidated and combined into 10, how useful is it to invest in all of them now at this point of time and all make them greener or more efficient? To switch to renewable energy isn't really that difficult of an undertaking, and it's a very low-hanging fruit. What is correct is that something like lost heat, switching to utilizing that lost heat is quite an undertaking, so something that you should take into consideration. There's a Berlin data center that's been trying to utilize their exhaust heat, and they're renting the building from someone that is owned by someone else. And sometimes, more than often, the owner of the building aren't really interested in utilizing this exhaust heat, or the heat producer of the district isn't really interested in providing that sort of heating. At the same time, like there's new data centers that are being created all the time. Like they keep aiming for limiting the number that's creating new. The reduction should be happening based on the consolidation, but in reality, that's not actually really happening. And so the number of our data centers keeps growing, and the number of sustainability data centers are not actually being reached. So people in the hall, we're going to keep 2 questions from the internet for the time being, because the people on site are in the advantageous position of being able to ask Anke questions on the site. Wonderful. I have 2 more questions from the internet. So on the one hand, calculating the hardware footprint, new software does require new hardware. How do these matrix get generated, and are they publicly accessible? So I do know that the Ministry of Environment has a study how we can calculate these things, but I myself was not able to get the data. So I retrieved the data from the study that generically took sample software and researched how they were impacting on utilizing the hardware that they were running on. And we can see that the differences are quite high. Very specifically for what the federal government is using, it's very difficult. We don't really have that. There's obviously a lot of regulations, paper guidelines, and technically they're all supposed to take this into consideration, but I fear that these processes aren't really put into action based on the data that we have. So I assume that's just simply not happening.
Okay, thank you so much, not just for the talk, but for you carrying the burden of transparency and asking all these questions and giving this role model here to all of us. Thank you, Anke. With these kinds of inquiries, we can exert pressure, and for that, thank you very much. And again, another huge applause for Anke, please.